Hi, everybody. First thing that I want to say is thank you all so much for tuning into my podcast. Today's episode or podcast kind of idea is going to be surrounding leadership. So, last week I asked for you all to send in to me some questions that you might have about leadership. And so, we're going to go over those right now. So these are just from everybody that's been listening. The first question is, what is my definition of leadership? So I would have to say, actually, one of my favorite ways to look at it was by Beebe and Motet. And they said simply that to lead is to influence others. And I agree with this so much because I don't feel like you can be a leader if you don't have the ability to influence other people. I think that's really important, and not a lot of people think of leadership in that way. And so, we see a lot of examples where leadership fails, one of which was during a mountain excursion. So essentially, there was like several groups of climbers on this mountain, and they get started, and they called it the Savage Mountain. And whenever they go up, they're so close to being able to summit. And instead of working together to figure out an organized plan of how they could all accomplish that goal, they decided to just kind of every man for themselves in that situation, which is definitely not influencing others. So what they did is they ended up like running out of rope. So they weren't able to make the climb. There were people that got stranded. There's people that actually lost their lives trying to do that climb. And so I think it's really important for us to consider the fact that you can't lead blindly. Not everybody can be a leader. And I think that's part of my definition of leadership as well. You can't have every single person in a group wanting to lead or wanting to be the best, because in turn you're just going to end up failing and failing miserably, which is what we saw there. So we're going to move on to the second question now. What are your leadership goals? So I'd have to say that my leadership goals in terms of being a leader to other people would be to be completely understanding, to be patient, and to work as a team. I really value everybody's ideas because everybody thinks differently, and I think that that's important. If I were to just try to solve something on my own, I'm not always going to be able to do it because I might not think about it the way that somebody else thinks. And I think this is important to consider in organizations as well. If you want to implement change, or if there's a problem that's, not being able to be solved, take your inputs from all sides. Take as many opinions and, possible solutions as you can in order to succeed as a whole. And I think that that's really, really important. Again, patience. I don't always expect people to be 100% intelligent. I just don't. Especially in terms of what would make sense to me doesn't necessarily need to make sense to somebody else. But what I do expect is for people to at least be competent enough in their job and in their task that there can be several people working towards that goal, doing what they're each competent at, if that makes sense. So I feel like those are really important to me in terms of how I perceive myself as a leader, or what I would expect in a scenario where I would have to be the leader of the group. The next question is, what do you think about leadership? Again, I think I've already kind of said this, but leadership is extremely important because without somebody leading the group, and it doesn't have to be, a authoritarian point of view. So what that means is that there doesn't necessarily have to be somebody that's barking out orders to other people. And we'll get to, there's actually a question kind of, where I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. But I think it is important to have somebody that's at least taking a leadership role in terms of organization, finding who's best at what, and then using those people to their advantage, really utilizing those individuals in the best way that they possibly can to get the overall goal completed. So the next question is, what or who has influenced your thoughts on leadership? I'm going to be honest, I've not had much experience with leadership other than in projects and stuff in school. So I've never been, except for once for, probably 2 years in a leadership role or a management role. It's just not my thing. I think I could do it. It's just not necessarily my thing. I think if I had to choose, I would definitely rather be a follower, if you will, or somebody that's at least, you know, taking part to contribute to the overall goal, but not necessarily being the ringleader. It's just not my thing. So I haven't really been influenced too terribly much by people. I wish I could say differently, but unfortunately, I think I've had a lot of jobs where the leaders are just, they're not good. It's not that they're not good people, but they're not good listeners, which I think is extremely, extremely important. If you're going to be a leader, you have to listen. And I've not really experienced that a whole lot. Now, I did have somebody at one of my jobs that was above my supervisor who is an extremely good listener. They understand the need to have different individuals doing different tasks based on what their strengths are. And so for me, I think in really thinking about these questions and trying to come up with, wow, what do I, really think about it, or what my idea of it is, it actually is kind of, if I was wanting to be a leader, it would be similar to the style that she uses in terms of just being an overall, like, approachable, nice person who really values everybody's input. Because those kinds of leaders, I think, are the ones that are going to influence their workers to bleed for them, you know what I mean? To put everything that they have into that job. And, I do think that is, probably the most effective method in doing so, in my opinion. So the next question comes in. It says, what key leadership experiences have informed your thinking? So key leadership experiences will not necessarily talk about me, but it's somebody else that I observed that I had to work for directly who kind of shaped me into realizing what I don't want to be. And so this person is extremely authoritative. They actually requested that I did a lot of their work, mostly because they didn't know how to do it. But, I still got paid less. And so not only was I doing my own tasks that I was assigned to, but I was doing supervisory work as well that in hindsight never really should have been on me, because that person, again, going back to what I said earlier, was not necessarily competent in their job. This person also, in that same authoritarian style, like, they demanded respect. They had been there for a long time and they thought, hey, I've been here a while. I deserve it. I'm earned this. This specific supervisor was never happy for their employees whenever they accomplished something, which, as a supervisor, I think it's also important to know that it's especially not about you. I think it's about your workers at that point. And I feel like it reflects well on the supervisors whenever they have their employees doing good things, doing well, and being selected to do these extra things. And this person was just not that way. Trying not to use pronouns, but they were very insecure in themselves. And they also were almost jealous about other people's success. Well, I've been here longer. Why are you chosen to do this? Instead of maybe trying to think about it a different way, like, oh, you were chosen to do this. That reflects well on me. That says something good about me, that my employees are successful. And so that kind of molded my experience a bit, and just knowing that I don't want to be that way if I ever do come to a point in my life where I am a supervisor in any given situation. I want to be supportive, and I want, to promote that attitude that if my employees do well, that looks good on me, and I would be, happy for them and their own success because they would have been able to build up, experience and added to their resume. And I just think that's great overall, especially being in a supervisory position and being able to see that happen for the people that work for you. So moving on, what core values are you not willing to violate? That is a good question. So I do pride myself on being extremely honest. I think sometimes that can be to a fault. I tell it how it is. I tell it how I see it. And I don't like when I know that somebody is lying to save face. That's not my cup of tea. If you did something wrong, that's fine. Apologize for it. Own your mistakes, move on, and learn from it. Don't let it happen again. But at the same time, own up to what you did. So I would say as a leader, that it would be one of the things that I just would not be able to compromise at all. I would still be extremely honest. Again, I think another core value that I would not be willing to violate is being a good listener and being patient. As a supervisor, you're not always going to hear things that you want to hear from employees, or you might think that some ideas are kind of silly and you don't really think that they're going to work. I think it's still important to be patient with somebody, explain to them anyway your point of view, and try to come to maybe like a mutual agreement where everybody gets a little bit of what they want and the task can still be completed. And so, those would be just like two of the biggest things that I would never, ever violate is honesty and basically essential communication. So listening, being patient, and integrity as well is another big one for me. So moving on to the next and final question that was sent in. It is, what is your vision of leadership? So I think over the length of this podcast, we've really kind of gotten a good idea of what my vision overall would be. But I'll reiterate that a little bit. If I had a vision of leadership, it would be somebody that is honest, opaque. I would speak to everybody. I would actually take time to get to know my employees because, I think part of being a leader and having good communication is realizing that not every approach fits every individual. So not every communication style is going to work for every single person. So you got to know who your employees are, and then you got to be able to translate that into the communication style that works best for them. And it's going to be different depending on who they are. So I think just having a knowledge of my employees, being able to ensure that they, all are able to be communicated with effectively from me, that they know what to expect out of me because I am transparent. And I don't expect for people to give up or act uninterested. I want people to give their all. And I think honesty is a way that you build that trust and how you get people to work for you. So I think overall, my vision would be pretty simple. Not laissez-faire, but not authoritarian either. I think my style would be more the democratic way in which kind of everybody is collectively involved in decision making. That way, even if a decision is made that's not what the majority might necessarily want, at least everybody was able to voice their concerns or their opinions or their solutions. And I think that again, is the best way to get things done because you're seeing things from different angles that you might not have previously seen them from. So I think overall, in conclusion, that leadership is super important. I think you have to know your audience. I think that you have to be consistent. That's another thing I think that's really important in terms of leadership. There has to be consistency. You can't act one way one day and then the next day the same situation come up and you act a totally different way. You must handle things, the same. That way, again, with that honesty, that consistency as well will help to build trust and I think really be able to provide you with some followers. So that's kind of my takeaway from leadership. And if you guys have any input or anything, I would love to hear it. You guys can message me and let me know kind of if you have any more input into what I said, if you see anything that's kind of similar to your all style, or if you think maybe even something else or a different, a different style would be better in terms of leadership and why you think that works. So thanks, guys. I'm Elizabeth, and I appreciate you guys tuning into my podcast. Have a great day.
You are nobody until somebody loves you. You're nobody till somebody cares. Now you may be king, you may possess the world and its gold. Gold will never buy a happiness when you're growing old.